Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's audio discussion. This is part two of the 2024 Africa elections and its implications for businesses. We did part one of the discussion last week, and which focused on Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, and South Africa. In today's discussion, we will go over Algeria, Tunisia, Chad, Ghana, Guinea, Togo, Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia, Rwanda, and South Sudan. So to kick off the discussion, I want to invite with me and my colleagues, Dr. Ramu, who is a senior geopolitical analyst with the company, as well as Fatima, who is a research and executive assistant at the company as well. So at this point, I want to invite Dr. Ramu just to brief us on what could unfold in Algeria and Tunisia as far as the this year's elections are concerned in the two countries. Ramu.
Thanks a lot, Sitati. Let me cut to the chase directly because it's a whole bunch of countries we need to talk about in this discussion. So, in Algeria, presidential elections will be held in December. The current president, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, is yet to declare if he will run for a second term, having been already elected in 2019. The Algerian constitution mandates a president to rule for 2 5-year terms. It was an infinite mandate was given in 2008, but then again, like they repealed that amendment and got it back to 2 terms in 2016. Anti-government protests have rarely occurred under the current president, as opposed to how they were the norm a few months before the December 2019 presidential elections. And the 2019 protest, which is infamously dubbed as the Hirak protest, advocated for democratic reforms. A referendum to revise the constitution was held in November 2020, and it was an outcome of the Hirak protest. Algeria's public is concerned about the slow pace of Tebboun's administration to address corruption and enhance democratic reforms. However, the Tebboune-led government has been proactive in the last 2 years in positioning Algeria as an alternative source of gas for Europe, especially Southern Europe, following the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Uh, Now we jump over to Tunisia. In Tunisia, presidential elections will be held this year, although the specific month and date for the polls are yet to be determined. President Kais Saied is expected to run for a second term, having been first elected in 2019. President Said's administration has constantly been criticized by opposition parties and even from parts of the civil society and academia for failing to enhance economic, political, and social reforms, contrary to the weighty expectations in the aftermath of the 2011 uprisings, which was part of the Great Arab Spring series of revolutions. Anti-government protests have constantly featured during his presidency. And he was also, he was under the radar amongst democracy activists for imprisoning many of the reformist scholars and reformist politicians represented under the Ennahda party, which had come to power so famously after the 2011 Arab Spring uprisings. President Said has has on several occasions been accused of promoting authoritarian leadership. And this is just about what I have to describe about the election scenario in the two North African nations. Now,
Yes.
let me just take it back to Sitati to talk about Chad in Central Africa.
Yeah, thanks, Ramu, for that cover for Algeria and Tunisia. Certainly two interesting countries to watch out this year as far as the elections are concerned. But I think Chad in Central Africa would be much more interesting to watch, given the political developments that have taken place rather in Chad over the last 2 to 3 years. And based on that, the presidential elections will be held in October. The parliamentary elections are also expected to take place this year, although the date for these elections are yet to be revealed. You have to note here that these are transition elections intended to pave the way for a return to civilian rule, given the fact that Chad has been under military-led government since April 2021. An important point to also mention at this juncture is that transition elections were initially to be held in October 2022, but they were postponed by the military regime. This led to violent protests where around 100 people died and hundreds of others were injured. Interestingly, among the organizers of the protests was then vocal opposition leader, Succes Masra of the Transformers Party, whom was appointed as the country's prime minister by the junta in early last month. Another key point to mention here is that the head of the transition government, Mahamat Deby, who is also a son of the immediate former long-serving president, Idris Deby, is expected to vie for the presidency. On the 13th of last month, that is January, the ruling party, the Patriotic Salvation Movement, nominated Mahamat as its presidential candidate. Two other notable political developments took place in December and January. The first one is a constitutional referendum, which a new constitution was adopted, and the newly promulgated constitution allows military officers to vie as candidates in the elections. And that justifies why Mahamat Deby will be contesting. Another one, which I just mentioned a few seconds ago, is the appointment of Succes Masra as the prime minister. Masra reiterates that he will run in the presidential elections. This is despite being appointed as prime minister by the military. So certainly this is one interesting election, which it will be good to follow up as we proceed with the year. Otherwise, at this point, I want to bring in Fatima just to cover off on some of the election-related activities in Guinea, Ghana, and Togo. Fatima.
Thanks, Sitati. So we have some interesting election environment going on in West Africa as well. I'll start off with Guinea. So the military-led government has reiterated that a constitutional referendum and transition elections will be held this year, but the specific dates for the elections are yet to be decided. The military has been in power since September 2021 when it overthrew the civilian president Alpha Conde. Now, opposition parties and civil society groups are skeptical whether the military will facilitate transition elections. This is against the backdrop of the military having deliberately delayed elections in the last 2 years by not unveiling a definite transition timeline. Now, the anti-military protest also occurred last year and in 2022 with opposition parties and civil society groups unhappy with the military's lack of commitment to facilitate the return of a civilian leadership. Now, moving to Ghana, general elections will be held on December 7 this year to elect the president and members of parliament. The incumbent president Nana Akufo-Addo is eligible to run, having served 2 terms already. The former president John Mahama Darmani and the current vice president Mahamudu Buvamia are likely to be the leading candidates for this year's election. Now, Ghana has a good reputation as a stable and democratic country in West Africa and Africa at large. However, it has struggled with huge amounts of public debt and other financial and monetary issues over the last decade. And these issues are expected to emerge as a major campaign issues for the upcoming elections. Now, moving on to Togo, the parliamentary elections will be held this year, though the date is yet to be publicized. And Togo's politics is dominated by the ruling Union for the Republic Party, whose leader, Fare Nyasinda, sorry for my pronunciation, has been the country's president since 2005, when his father, Nyasinde Edima, died. Now, this is what is upcoming in West Africa. And Sitati, I would like to bring you back in to talk about elections in Southern Africa.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Fatima, for that. Before I transition to Southern Africa, I have to mention that for the three Western African countries that you just mentioned, I mean, Guinea, Ghana, and Togo, I think Guinea would be one of the most, I mean, among the three, the most perhaps closely followed elections, given the fact that the military is yet to pave the way for a return to civilian rule. So it remains to be seen whether civilian leadership will be institutionalized by the military. So certainly that is one election to watch. And of course, in addition to that, what we discussed last week, Burkina Faso and Mali, the developments over there will also be interesting to watch as far as elections are concerned for this year. Nonetheless, we will look at the implications for this on businesses in a short while. But before then, in Southern Africa, Botswana general elections will be held in October, and President Eric Mogwetsi Masisi is expected to run for re-election. The opposition coalition umbrella, the opposition coalition referred to as the Umbrella for Democratic Change, is expected to strongly challenge the ruling Botswana Democratic Party. In Mozambique, which I also believe would be one interesting election to watch in Africa, the presidential election will be held in November. President Filipe Nyusi will step down, having served a two-term limit, and the election is expected to be a showdown between the ruling Mozambican Liberation Front, that is Frelimo, and the main opposition party, the Mozambican National Resistance Movement, otherwise called Renamo. It's critical to mention that President Nyusi's administration has faced several challenges, with the most notable being the threat of insurgency in Cabo Delgado province, which still persists 3 years down the line. And his administration has not really been effective in curbing kidnapping, which is also another threat, especially against business people. Unemployment is also a major issue in Mozambique. Down south in Namibia, general elections are expected to be held in November, and the recently sworn-in president, Angola Mbumba, will not run in the elections, as he said a few days ago. Mbumba has just succeeded the late President Hage Geingob, who died on the 4th of February. And to cap it all for these discussions in the East African region, I mean, in Rwanda, general elections are supposed or are expected to be held on the 15th of July, and long-serving President Paul Kagame is expected to seek re-election to extend his 24-year rule. Further up in South Sudan, which is Africa's youngest country, general elections are supposed to be held on July 9th. But there are concerns whether the elections will take place due to several factors, which we are going to look at in a few minutes' time. So at this point, I think it will be prudent enough for me to invite my colleagues, starting with Ramu, just to give us a picture and outlook of what businesses could expect going forward as far as these elections are concerned.
Thanks, Sitati. I would like to talk about some of the possible implications that businesses could incur in Algeria and Tunisia. Let's start, for example, with Algeria. Don't be surprised, if the opposition attempts to boycott the elections under the current circumstances. The military is actually quite influential behind the scenes, and it has a track record of working in most of such volatile situations to enhance overall stability. Because in that entire region, the military of some of the Saharan Arab countries has been as kind of like has a self-professed role of being the custodian of political stability. I mean, if you take, for example, how it is in Egypt, or for example, how it used to be in Libya under General Gaddafi, who was, violently usurped in a kind of an extra regional NATO involved conflict. And at the same time, vote rigging amongst other electoral integrity issues could come up. State agencies are likely to sustain a crackdown on opposition and civil society groups. Overall, elections that are not free and fair could obviously result in unrest. Government policy is unlikely to change even after the elections. Now let's jump on to Tunisia. The major concerns are again vote rigging and a crackdown on opposition politicians and supporters. Because President Said is he vehemently opposes political Islam. I mean, he's one of those leaders in that entire Middle East, North Africa belt who goes by the ideology that political Islam can result in long-term instability in the governance of their country. And so he has opposed factions of the Muslim Brotherhood who have been active in Egypt. And unfortunately, like, yeah, in Egypt, like they have been mostly like, kicked out by the LCC-led military government. But in Libya, there are so many sectarian non-state actors who are kind of like who are mostly like trying to cross into Tunisia as well as Algeria through the porous borders, and even through the influx of migrants and refugees, which at most of the times are illegal in nature. And in Tunisia, post-election, there may not be a radical shift in government policy, just like in neighboring Algeria. However, businesses could continue facing risks resulting from the stagnating Tunisian economy. Yeah, I mean, that's about what I have to say for these two countries. Sitati, if you could enlighten us about what the implications for businesses would be in the Sahel region and part of the Saharan region, like, for example, like take, for example, Chad.
Yeah, certainly for sure, Ramu. I mean, certain risks are bound to face businesses in Chad. To start with, the risk of election-related violence will be high in the election period, especially if both the interim president Mahamat Deby and Prime Minister Succes Masra vie for the presidency. It's also critical to mention the fact that divisions within the military could trigger coup attempts, just like it happened last month before the ruling party nominated Mahamat as its candidate. Rebel groups are also watching out, and two of them, that is the Front for Change and Concord, and the Popular Front for Recovery, called for uprisings against the military in 2022. And this is when President Mahamat appeared to delay the transition elections. And so political instability is thus a major issue as far as the elections are concerned. On across in West Africa, that is in Guinea, election-related violence and resistance against the military officers running the elections could, trigger further political instability. Coup attempts are also possible given divisions in the armed forces. And in case we have elections in Guinea, I mean, election-related violence is also is also an issue, I mean, for businesses to also watch out. Fatima, perhaps you can also brief us what risks could face businesses in Ghana and Togo?
Right, thanks, Sitati. So you are right about Guinea, and these are the elections that will be monitored very closely. But also in the region, speaking of Ghana, we can expect a political stability to prevail, as the country has a high reputation of electoral commission as well as judicial independence. However, there will be risk associated with the flattering economy, as it will affect the businesses. And in Togo, we can expect some election-related violence due to electoral malpractice, as the ruling party seeks to extend its rule. So these will be the key implications in these two countries, and we can maybe Siddharth, you can enlighten us more implications for countries in Southern Africa.
Yeah, before I maybe jump in with my thoughts on some of the, expected impact for businesses, perhaps Ramu can quickly cover off what to expect in Botswana and probably Mozambique.
All right. Thanks, Sitati. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, so let's see Botswana. So Botswana is one of Africa's most stable and longest multi-party democracies. I mean, this could be exemplified in the fact that there are many multinational companies that have been operating in Botswana for decades. And if you take, for example, I mean, like just to give you a sort of a trivia, like from my native country, India, I've known many chartered accountants who have relocated to Botswana, who have lived over there for years as CAs in major multinational companies, and they have kind of vouched for the stability of this country. So yeah, it's mostly uneventful compared to its more volatile neighborhood. Concerns on political stability and a radical shift in government policy are unlikely to arise, with the current scenario. A similar observation can be made of neighboring Namibia too. But let's jump on to Mozambique over here. In Mozambique, election-related violence is likely given the high stakes of the polls. Insurgency, mostly associated with the volatile and the natural gas-rich Cabo Delgado province, is possible, and it may also scuttle election-related activities in this particular province. Corruption will be another major issue post-election, while government policy is expected to more or less remain the same. Over to you, Sitati, to talk about Rwanda.
Thanks, Ramu. Before I quickly jump over to Rwanda and South Sudan, I also have to mention that, Botswana has a fantastic record of being one of the most, being one of the least corrupt countries in Africa. So certainly its investment climate is certainly decent for businesses going by African standards. Jumping over to Rwanda, the ruling party, that is the Rwanda Patriotic Front, is expected to dominate the elections. Election-related violence is unlikely, and political stability is expected to prevail. In South Sudan, elections are likely to be postponed due to the lack of funds for the Electoral Commission. And recently, a few days ago, President Salva Kiir made an appeal to the so-called international community for, financial resources to be pooled in order for elections to be held in the country. Apart from that, violence cannot be ruled out, given that South Sudan has been at war in the last decade. Coup attempts are also possible. A similar attempt took place in November last year. And this only means that political instability will be a major issue before and after the elections. So this marks the end of this audio discussion. But before I welcome Dr. Ramu and Fatima, maybe for their final thoughts, I'd like to say that businesses should be aware of the operations being affected directly or indirectly by some of the risks that we have discussed for the specific countries. And of course, they should not hesitate reaching out to APEC assistance for comprehensive and bespoke risk assessments to help them mitigate these risks. Your final thoughts, Dr. Ramu, Fatima, as we wind up?
It's good for now from my end. Thanks a lot, both of you, for this wonderful and scintillating discussion.
Yes, Fatima.
Yeah, same Siddharthi. Thanks to you and Ramu for this insightful discussion. I think we have a lot of critical countries to look out for the election period.
Yes, so that marks the end of today's discussion. I want to appreciate your inputs, Dr. Ramu, our senior geopolitical analyst at APEC Assistance, and Fatima, our research and executive assistant at APEC Assistance as well. So join us for other discussions next week as we cover off Europe, Middle East, and Africa in such discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.